Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. It's been a while since I've uploaded a video, and for obvious reasons I didn't want to put out one that would misinform or confuse you guys, right? While we were still waiting for some clarity on Game Week 8 whether the fixtures would go ahead or not, right? But thankfully now the Premier League has announced that in Game Week 8, 6 teams blank, and that's Manchester United, Leeds, Liverpool, Chelsea, Brighton and Crystal Palace, right? So with that we can kind of plan ahead, right, with more certainty and take a look at how a Wildcard 8 draft looks, right? Now if you're here and you're watching this, you could be in either one of these groups. Firstly, you could have activated your wildcard in Game Week 7 and it's rolling over now to Game Week 8, right? I think this draft would really help you to take you through the rest of the season. And then it is also possible that you could be affected by the Game Week 8 postponements really badly and you're forced into a Game Week 8 wildcard. Right, and lastly, the last group of you could be in a limbo similar to mine, right, where I have 6 to 7 starters in Game Week 8, maybe a couple of free transfers, and you're thinking whether to wildcard now or save it for Game Week 9. Right, so today, just before we take a look at the wildcard draft for Game Week 8, I thought it'd be good for us to look at the advantages and disadvantages of a Game Week 8 and Game Week 9 wildcard, compare the two, and for those of you who have already activated it, or most likely are going to activate it, I think it still will be helpful to consider the possibility of what you're missing out on if you had wildcard in Game Week 9 instead, right, and try to cover the advantages of a later wildcard in your current wildcard draft, right? So that was a very long intro, but if you guys do enjoy this video, please give it a like and also subscribe as well if you are new around here. Right, so on the screen right now, we're going to take a look at the fixture swings for a Game Week 8 and Game Week 9 wildcard team. Right, I reached out to Yonkers FPL on Twitter to include this graphics in the video, and he very kindly said yes. So shout out to Yonkers FPL on Twitter. Right, give him a follow if you guys are interested. Right, and basically how these graphs work is that it measures the fixture swings for game weeks pre and post the World Cup. Wildcard, sorry. Right, so green fixtures would mean a positive fixture swing and red fixtures would obviously mean a negative fixture swing. So looking at the two, it's pretty similar, right? It's the same tail where we see the mid-table teams with the positive fixture swings, especially teams like Fulham, West Ham, Newcastle, Aston Villa and Leicester. And then we also see a similar trend where the negative fixture swings happen for bigger teams like Liverpool, Chelsea and Arsenal, right? So in essence, what we can gather from this is that a wildcard 8 and a wildcard 9 team would not look that different at all, right, in terms of the players and the teams we want to target at least. So let's now zoom into the pros and cons of using it now in Game Week 8 as opposed to delaying it till Game Week 9. So talking first about a wildcard in Game Week 8, should you hit the button now, there are a couple of advantages, and first and foremost, it is being able to deal with the 6 teams that blank in Game Week 8, especially since most of us actually have quite a couple of players from these teams. A wildcard 8 could really bail us out of this situation, right? I saw a couple of people on Twitter actually thinking of free hitting in Game Week 8 and then wildcarding in Game Week 9. Now, I personally wouldn't advise that because a wildcard in Game Week 8 is essentially able to do exactly what you need, which is to save your team for Game Week 8 and prepare it for Game Week 9 onwards. Plus, you get to save the free hit chip in the process. So I'm much more for the idea of either wildcarding in Game Week 8 or just using free transfers to get out of the tight spot that you're in right now. Now, next up, as we saw in the graphs as well, right, the mid-table teams are the ones with great fixtures coming up, and a wildcard does allow us to jump on them right now, which is when their fixture swings actually start already, right, especially teams like Newcastle who play Bournemouth and Fulham who play Nottingham Forest. Another advantage is that, as we mentioned, a Game Week 8 wildcard is very similar to a Game Week 9 wildcard. So by hitting the button now, you essentially get to go ahead of the curve, bring in the players that everyone would eventually be hopping on right now, right, and then gain some team value in the process. Now, of course, there are downsides to activating your wildcard in Game Week 8, and the major one being the international break between Game Week 8 and Game Week 9. Now, international breaks are known to be the point in time or points in the season, right, where a couple of players end up getting injured, and by wildcarding in Game Week 8, we put ourselves in a tight spot, right, because we only have one free transfer to manage any injuries or problems that may arise in our teams, right. Lastly, there are also better options that may recover from the injuries over the international break, right? Some players would come back from injuries. Take, for example, those of you who want to go for Luka Dean because of Aston Villa's good fixture run coming up. Medicash could be back after the international break, and he is definitely someone you would want over Luka Dean. Right? Another is Allan Saint-Maximin, who is a good shout in his price range if he's fit as well. So this is pretty much the decision factors or the major things that we should consider for a wildcard in Game Week 8. And let's now take a look at the pros and cons of saving the wildcard for Game Week 9. So taking a look at a Game Week 9 wildcard, we essentially are able to use free transfers to dead end our team into Game Week 8, and this basically allows us to do certain things. Right, firstly, we will be able to hold on to Arsenal assets for Game Week 8 if we do think that they will do well against Brentford, and secondly, we can punt on Tottenham assets who play Leicester at home, and we know how terrible Leicester's defense is at the moment. Now, I really do fancy a punt on players like Kane and Son for Game Week 8. Another positive is that we can sell Liverpool assets in Game Week 8 to make way for the punts that we want to take and then bring them back right away in Game Week 9, which would work well for those of us who want to keep the faith in Jurgen Klopp and hold on to some Liverpool assets for the run coming up. Right, and finally, what I think is one of the major advantages of a Game Week 9 wildcard is that you get more time to think about your team over the international break, can immediately deal with any injuries of the players that could get injured in the international break, and obviously information is key for good planning in FPL, and we saw that this game week already. So having more time also means that you can gather more information to make better decisions. Right, on to the disadvantages, and one of the key issues about wildcarding in Game Week 9 is that we could potentially lose out on the good fixtures that West Ham, Aston Villa, Fulham and Newcastle have in Game Week 8. Right, we saw in the graphs earlier how their fixtures all swing this game week, and maybe we won't miss out on all these teams, but we would miss out on some players that we would rather have. Right, next up, delaying the wildcard also means that players' prices may rise, and that could eventually price us out of certain players, which would be a tough spot for us as well. Right, and lastly, we may end up even with the same team as a wildcard 8, right, when we wildcard in Game Week 9, because after all, it is just a difference of one game week, so our wildcards may not look too dissimilar at all. So having weighed up all these factors, I've built a wildcard 8 draft. For those of you who are wildcarding in Game Week 8, I also do advise that you try to cover some of the advantages that a wildcard 9 would have as well, and this way you can maybe get the best of both worlds if there is such a thing in FPL. So here's the Game Week 8 wildcard draft that I've come up with, and it's a price range that I think is pretty alright for most of us, 100.7 mil, and we're gonna go with a 3-4-3 formation. At the back, there's Nick Pope, Trippier, Luka Dean and Cancelo. Now, Newcastle have been a really strong outfit in defense, and it's mainly due to these two, Pope and Trippier, and they have also been scooping up the bonus points whenever they keep a clean sheet. Pope because of the saves he's been making, and Trippier because of the sheer number of chances he creates from set pieces, right? And then there's Luka Dean, who most of us would actually shy away from because of how much of a troll he's been, but I think objectively speaking, Aston Villa's fixtures are really decent from a defensive standpoint, and with Cash out injured, that leaves us with Luka Dean to cover those Villa fixtures, which I do feel will bring some clean sheets in the coming game weeks. As for Cancelo, I feel like he's a staple, right? Fixture proof and a nailed starter for Man City. Now in the midfield, we've gone for Son, Martinelli, Andreas and Bowen. I've chosen to go for Son over KDB mainly because of this Leicester at home fixture, which I really think Son is going to wreak havoc on. Right? He has been underperforming in the first few games of the season, but in the recent games, I've started to see some sparks of Son from last season returning again. And to be fair, he was a little unlucky to come away with no returns in the last few games. Right, in FPL, sometimes we can't wait for players to start returning before we jump on them. Right, we will have to trust our read sometime, and Son is a player that I think we are going to start seeing some consistent returns from. Right, as for Martinelli, I think it's pretty much a case of him being the best midfield option at that price range. Right, others like Rashford and Allan Saint-Maximin, right, either they don't have games in Game Week 8 or are injured. So Martinelli is pretty much a no-brainer actually. Right, and then Andreas Pereira, as always, is the best 4.6 budget midfielder in the game right now. Plus, he's got Nottingham Forest away, which is a fixture that he could really capitalize on. Right, on to Jarrod Bowen, and he is another one of those players I feel he has been underperforming in the first few games, right? But he's been doing much better in the last few. And in general, I think there are some players that just take a while to warm up before they actually get into the groove of playing Premier League games weekly again, right? And that's what I think Bowen could be facing right now, right? Similar to Son. I think watching him play, I do sense that he could be on the rise, and there is talk of him being on penalties as well, because he did take a penalty in the Europa League when Antonio and other first choice takers were on the pitch as well, right? So all things considered, I'd say Bowen will make a really good differential. And then up front, we have Isak, Haaland and Mitrovic. I don't think this front three needs much convincing, because I think we're all pretty much set on Haaland and Mitrovic, who have both been extremely consistent, right? And for Isak, I've put him in the draft for three main reasons: his fixtures, his underlying numbers, and price point. Now, Newcastle's fixtures are great, right? Isak's underlying numbers have also only been second to Mitrovic at the 6 to 8 mil price range, so it's really cheap for the value he does offer. And then moving on to the bench very quickly, it's a pretty stacked bench, right? But we're going to see this as a common trend for Game Week 8 wildcards, and that's because the postponed fixtures in Game Week 8 just make it as such, right? So of course, we are building a wildcard for the long term, so these bench players, I feel they are very stacked, so you're going to start them come Game Week 9 onwards, right? So we have Ward as the backup keeper, and then there's Emerson, Maddison and James. Now, Emerson is what you can call the new Neco Williams, I feel, right? West Ham have a really good run coming up, and Emerson is playing as a wingback at just 4 mil. So I do see him as an upgraded Neco Williams because he is from a stronger side, right? As for Maddison, he is a key player that I would really recommend from Game Week 9 onwards, when Leicester actually start playing Nottingham Forest. Now, I do expect him to really bang in that game and the next few games as well, right? And he's on the bench right now, but you could actually make a case to take a punt, start him when he plays Tottenham away, right? And take one of the starting 11 players out. That's a possibility as well, but personally I would just bench him in Game Week 8 if I was wildcarding with this team. Right, and lastly, there's Reece James, who's on the bench because he doesn't have a game in Game Week 8. So looking at this team, we have 14 players who have games in Game Week 8. So we've practically dealt with the 6 teams who have their games postponed in Game Week 8. We also cover assets with good fixture swings from teams like Newcastle, Fulham, Aston Villa, West Ham, and we also have the staples like Cancelo and Haaland. So we also have some nice differentials actually in Son, right? So I really like this team. I'm currently undecided on my own plans for my team, right? Whether I want to wildcard now or save it for a later game week and just manage it with some free transfers. But if I am going to wildcard, I think my team would look really similar to this one, and I'll be taking the rest of the day to actually decide whether I want to hit that button or not, right? With the pros and cons that I've laid out in this video for you guys as well, right? And I will upload my team selection video very soon, right? But for now, that's it for this one. If it has been helpful, right, and if you did enjoy it, please drop this video a like and also subscribe as well. If you are new around here, I massively appreciate it, right? But I will see you guys in another video very soon. Bye bye.